Not a lot of options. I'm so glad that we can admit that. I can't wait for the apology letters to flow in to President Trump down in Florida. Speaking of options, Elliot Page is an actress, formerly known as Ellen Page. I've never seen any of her movies, didn't really remember that she existed, but then she got a whole bunch of publicity because she decided that now she's a man and her name is Elliot, and she's now on the cover of Time magazine. Chalk another one up to the white supremacist patriarchy. You had a lesbian woman who was getting roles in Hollywood, who had gotten some attention, and now all of her roles, all of her attention, going to a straight white man. That's absolutely outrageous, isn't it? She writes, "We know who we are. People cling to these firm ideas about gender because it makes people feel safe. But if we could just celebrate all the wonderful complexities of people, the world would be a much better place." I agree with the back part of that. If we could just celebrate all the wonderful complexities of people, the world would be a much better place. But people like Elliot Page now, and people who are pushing this transgender ideology, refuse to deal in the complexities of people. It is complex when a young boy behaves in some ways that you might say are feminine. That is a complexity of life. It's a complexity that's always existed, and it's true of just about everybody. It is complex when a woman has sexual desire for another woman. That is a complex thing, because in the normal course of events, a woman would have sexual desire for men. But sometimes, because of the complexity of our world, it's a little different. It is a gross oversimplification of that complexity to say that if the boy ever reaches for a pink t-shirt, then he's really a girl. And you've got to mutilate him and pump him full of hormones and make him appear a little bit more like a girl. That is not complicating our understanding of human nature. It is simplifying it. We know who we are, she says. I don't think she does. I don't think any of us do. It comes back, though, to these heresies that pervade modern life. It actually comes back to the sin that caused the fall of man, which is pride. This idea that I know better than anybody else. I know human nature better than Aristotle. I know the relationship of the body to the soul better than St. Thomas Aquinas. I know the reality of sex better than every single person who lived before like 2004. I know who I am. And it comes back to this real error, which unfortunately, the reason I mention this here is because this is an error that pervades our politics. This error that we own our bodies. We don't own our bodies. We did not create our bodies. Our bodies are, to borrow a phrase from Rush Limbaugh, on loan from God. We don't decide when we come into this world, and we're probably not going to decide how we go out of this world. We are stewards of this free gift of creation. We are stewards of ourselves. We have been given this gift of ourself by God. We have intellect, we have will, and we have obligations to our Creator. You don't have to go back to the Middle Ages, to see these kinds of ideas being understood in a widespread manner. You see it in the Declaration of Independence. Our Creator endows us with certain unalienable rights, and those are wonderful privileges. And as part of that, there are certain obligations, and we come together and we form a polity for these purposes, and we have duty to one another, and we sacrifice, and we get these great privileges. Hey, wonderful. But what Elliot Page is now referring to, I know who I am, I'm really a boy, that is an ancient heresy. It's called Gnostic dualism. It's the idea that the body and the soul have nothing to do with one another. So my body, I look like, Ellen Page looks exactly like a girl, but deep down, somewhere in a non-physical space, metaphysically, she knows that she's a boy, and therefore she's now a boy. What's so weird, though, is while the left is pushing that heresy, this idea that the physical has nothing to do with reality, they're also pushing the opposite heresy, materialism. The idea that we are nothing more than bags of meat sort of walking around the streets, and we are nothing more than the sum total of our desires, and our desires are not rational. They're just pistons firing in our brains. So if it feels good, do it, because there's no such thing as a moral order. We're all just stuff, and we're going to die, and we're going to turn to worm food and take a dirt nap someday. These are opposite heresies. They are mutually exclusive. The left pushes them at the same time for the same reason that we've been talking about from the top of the show. Because the arguments themselves do not matter to the left. It's only the final goal, which is the upending of society, which until recently was grounded on the true understanding of what human beings are, which is body and soul, inextricably linked in this world. The technical term for it, from old Uncle Aristotle, is hylomorphism. There's this spiritual component to who we are, this metaphysical component, and there's also this physical component. I do have a body, I do live in space and time. That is the only idea you're not allowed to hold, according to the radical left these days, because that's the only idea that's true. Halsey, who I don't know who this is. I think she's a YouTuber. She is a pop singer. I don't know. She's someone who has a blue check mark and is fairly prominent. She is now changing her pronouns to she and they, she/they on social media bios. And this is receiving a lot of praise. I mentioned this one not to talk about it too much, only because we're now not only having he identify as she, we're also having objects identify as subjects. Right? In the actual language jargon, we're having the accusative case identify as the nominative case, because you'd think if she's going to do, okay, she's she, that's like, okay, she does this. It would be she and them, right? Because it's she, usually it would be she/her. But now it's she/they. So now even that last rule that, objects, even that one's gone now. Pretty soon the bios will just be blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 because you can see it advancing in real time. Words are losing their meaning, which is ultimately the goal, so that we can't reason. Orwell writes about this beautifully in 1984. He says the Ingsoc regime, the Big Brother regime, thrives on all sorts of things, changing the language through newspeak and the surveillance, but especially through doublethink. The idea that the regime will force you to hold mutually contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. So in your head, you've got to hold the idea that 2 + 2 = 4 and 2 + 2 = 5, let's say, just to pull an example out. If you hold those ideas in your head at the same time, it makes you unable and unwilling to think rationally. If you have to hold the idea in your mind that our true selves have nothing to do with our bodies and our true selves are just our bodies and nothing more, and you have to hold those in your head at exactly the same time, you can't think rationally. And that is ultimately the goal, because what political correctness or wokeism or cancel culture, whatever you want to call these left-wing ideologies or left-wing instruments, they are ultimately less about the arguments they're making than the imposition of the rules. That's why the PC jargon changes all the time. It doesn't really matter what jargon you're using. It's the imposition of it. Can these ideologues weaken your understanding of the world so much that you are vulnerable for them to impose their will, not their intellect, not their arguments, but their will on you? If you enjoyed that break from disinformation, historical revision, and screaming about the end of the world, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another video.